So, how many of these issues that are being discussed are genetic and how many are psychological? That is an age-old question, and a lot of it depends on the gradient and varies from person to person. One of the biggest confusions about this question is that both genetics and psychology are huge and complicated topics that if you only understand one side, one can end up discounting the other side. The reality is that it is more often than not something of a hybrid of these two. There are four major reasons why we think and act and have the psychological varieties that we do. These are genetic, epigenetic, psychology, and brain chemistry. Genetics we have discussed in the first two videos, however, a viewer brought up a good point that seems to be confusing to a lot of people. Not just one gene is responsible for how our bodies and minds react. Many times there are multiple genes that cause a certain trait. It is a mix of gradients in your genes, and one gene can suppress another gene and so on. So sometimes it is the combination of genes along with their gradients that is either a negative or a positive trait, and sometimes it is just one gene on the gradient, as with cilantro and durian. Epigenetics are a study of how the gene acts in reaction to their environment. Depending on the nutrient, chemical, or hormone, the gene may act differently, causing the development of a person to change. These changes occur as a way to compensate for the lack of, or the overabundance of the hormone or nutrient. One condition that increases the chance of homosexuality that has been studied in this field is if the mother's immune system becomes resistant to the male hormone if she has multiple boys. Because of this, the child will get insufficient male hormones that will affect their long-term brain chemistry, setting them up to have a more traditionally female-like drive such as attraction to men. This is a fairly new field that will open up and expand our understanding. Other examples include epigenetic carcinogens, which will cause cancer depending on the person, but they do not cause mutation. Many diseases like cancer and diabetes, as well as psychological conditions, exist in our DNA that may never come into existence depending on what conditions trip the gene into activating. Psychology and brain chemistry are the other parts of what makes us tick. The purpose of psychology is to find out what method of thinking one uses and what conditioning they have undergone, and then they teach people to better understand the way their mind works and to help them build mental constructs to better and more efficiently live in reality. Psychiatry and neurology study the chemistry and pathways of the brain to determine why some of these extreme and sometimes devastating conditions occur, like severe depression and bipolar disorder. Many of these may be genetic, but it is possible to build mental constructs or use drugs to combat the problem and allow them to function in regular society. Conditioning for such things as phobias, stigmas, and social conditions can be treated by learning how to build new mental constructs. Depression has many causes, one of which is too many corticosteroid receptors, so that a little stress can cause the body to produce a lot of cortisol. Cases of severe depression are extremely low in a survivalist society, which points to the possibility that in a society of survival and hard labor, the genes for devastating depression in a modern society may have had some advantage, as common as it is. Some drugs will knock out hormones or increase chemicals that are missing in an attempt to allow that person to function. Many of these drugs are overprescribed, unfortunately, because they want a quick fix and do not want to work at changing themselves through learning and psychology. How you were raised also has a major effect on how you manifest your genetic predisposition. A variation of the gene MAOA, called the warrior gene, causes a loss in the ability to be calmed by serotonin. This gene is common in dangerous psychopaths, but it also occurs in common people. The difference where this gene manifests is when usually only abuse occurs. If one has relatively healthy home life, the child can build mental constructs to control and relax themselves in other ways. Biased studies make the claim that homosexuality occurs because of sexual abuse or lack of a father figure. There is no evidence that homosexuality is any more or less likely to occur with abuse or good parenting than without. Pederasty and pedophilia is more likely to be passed on when a child was molested, and fundies tend to link the two together in the same amount of evil. One of our natural and most convenient reactions to someone's differences that we may find repulsive is that they are psychologically damaged or have issues. This is easy and a quick way to make it seem like banning or forbidding someone to do something they like is in their and everybody else's best interest. Unless there is real scientific evidence, we can't do this in a free society. Psychology and genetic gradients probably play fairly equal parts in our actions and thinking. The more in the center of the gradient you are, the more flexible you will be on going to one extreme or the other. For all I know, I may genetically be a 2 or a 3 on the Kinsian scale of sexuality, but because of social conditioning and the mental constructs I built up, I am somewhere around a 1 or a 0. I used to dislike Thai food and beer, not together, until I found some that were really good and had certain flavors associated with good memories and that quality of food. Before, I hated low-quality Thai or other flavors of beer, but now I can eat or drink them if they are all that are available, as they are cheaper replicas of something I do like. It is possible that if you build the right mental construct and are not too far on the end of the genetic gradient, you can live like the average of the population. A bisexual person could be perfectly happy being straight the rest of their life if homosexuality was shunned. A truly gay person could not. Monks and priests can build mental constructs to go against their natural desires for sex in most cases, but these are people in the middle of the gradient, or at the opposite end of the spectrum of nymphomania. The human mind is extremely flexible, and since we have an artistic mind, we are capable of finding beauty in anything. However, our base drives will make it difficult to become aroused if we are at the outlier of a gradient. My girlfriend and I discussed how artistically we can appreciate nudes of the same sex, but they give neither of us any arousal. This flexibility in artistic appreciation of the human mind is why those few gays can get converted to homosexuality, and they are touted as scientific test cases and proof that all gays are just emotionally damaged straight people, or just evil sinners and Jesus can make them straight with enough love. These people most likely created mental constructs of celibacy and self-hatred, and then sex with their wife is like appreciating a piece of art and having sex with it. They have a need that is not being fulfilled, and they are trying so hard to convince themselves and others that they are straight and completely happy with their life. Of course, since Jesus was a focus point for building their mental construct, just like with a drug or alcoholic mental construct, Jesus gets all the glory. Using mental constructs, and with enough hard work and problem solving, one can change just about anything about themselves, unless it is something chemical like bipolar. But that doesn't mean that the process won't be seriously emotionally painful and a complete waste of time, especially if you are on one extreme of the gradient, trying hard to act or think like someone on the other extreme of the gradient. Because of this, in a less super ego-based mind, to try and be the opposite of what they are, one more often uses a powerful but damaging mental construct used by most: hatred and fear. This can lead to violence and persecution as well as hypocrisy, especially when that person's hatred gives them power and influence over others, and then they feel untouchable and can rationalize that nothing they are doing is wrong. This occurs even more so in primitive or destitute and uneducated areas. When survival is your number one goal and you have no choice, you can put up with a lot. If I'm starving, I can eat just about anything. It is only until I have the freedom and variety of plenty that I learn to hone my tastes and select what I really enjoy. The same is true about who you're attracted to. If you are forced into a marriage, then yeah, you will have sex with them enough to have children, even if you hate it, because your survival in society requires it. The same thing is true about education system. Some people work very hard to break their natural learning habits and styles of learning so they can be better at working in the regular public school system, which tends to run counter to the way children learn. When a nation is prosperous and there are less repercussions from going against the social norm, you can be more selective. Desires are only available when possibility and freedom occur. I remember growing up and studying history, we noted that the rise in homosexual behavior in some empires tended to correlate the decline of the power of the empire, and so I and many Christians use that as evidence that homosexuality destroys the society. However, The peak of an empire also creates a lot of prosperity, and with this property comes a lot of greed and laziness, especially when it comes to paying attention to the government. Rise in homosexuality and variety is a benefit of prosperity. The decline comes from greed and laziness and a rise in superstition. Correlation is not causation.